And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you, and I'm pleased to have my old friend and writing partner Lamar Waldron in the studio with me today. Hey, Lamar.
Great to be with you again, Tom.
Great to have you join us. You have a new book out. It is where to go. It's over here. Oh, did you put that there, Jim, so you can get a shot of it? I'm sorry. Okay, it's called The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron, and it describes exactly how Godfather Carlos Marcello had John Kennedy killed. Along with the help of Santo Trafficante and others.
And plus, it's really a compendium in many ways of unreleased files that different agencies, especially the Secret Service, but all the big federal agencies, the FBI, CIA, have been keeping secret for 50 years at this point.
Wow. Is there a JFK conference in town this weekend?
There is, in fact, and if people want to know more, they can go to AARC.org, I believe it is. It's the Assassination Archives and Research Center. You may remember 25 years ago, we would come up to Washington and to their old facility with the old hand-operated elevator.
Yep. And what was his name, the guy who was running it?
Well, Jim Lazar.
Yeah.
Is still, he's doing this conference. And this has all of the JFK, not all, but pretty much the vast majority of the JFK authors and experts and even government investigators at one conference for the
Tony
first
Summers
time.
going to be here?
Tony Summers is going to be here.
That's great.
G. Robert Blakey, who headed the House Select Committee on Assassinations, who was their chief counsel. And just about every JFK author you can think of is going to be there. But we've really all kind of come together because we all have different conclusions because we've all looked at different information or, not everyone is as crazy as me to spend 25 years starting out with your help to investigate not just the Secret Service, but also the CIA and Lyndon Johnson and everybody. But, we're kind of all coming together this weekend so that we can focus on getting these darn JFK files released because it's been over 50 years. In fact, this week is the 50th anniversary of the release of the Warren Report.
Right. So these are the files that you're talking about are the files that Bill Clinton authorized release of, didn't he?
Well, Congress unanimously passed the JFK Act in 1992, and we have to give credit to Oliver Stone because it was the publicity surrounding his JFK film that finally prodded Congress to unanimously, and how often does that happen, pass this law. And Ted Kennedy was a big supporter of it as well. He was fine with whatever was going to come out. John Kerry was a big booster of it. And then that was actually passed under Bush. Democratic majority
in the election year, 92.
Right. But then he actually rushed out some documents to try to keep Congress from passing that law.
He being Bush?
Bush,
President
who was a former CIA director, who, while he was CIA director, let's just say a lot of files were withheld from congressional investigations in the 70s. So he kind of pushed some documents, old CIA documents, out in an effort to stem the passage of this law. It didn't work. But those documents that got kind of rushed out real quickly, those were a gold mine for you and I.
Yeah.
And then it was left to Bill Clinton to appoint this review board. Many of the agencies, especially the CIA, the Secret Service, and the Office of Naval Intelligence, just stonewalled up a blue streak. They had to actually extend the term of this review board. It was originally supposed to end, I believe, in 97. So many files hadn't been turned over. Extended it to 98. The last day, the last week, suddenly, all these agencies are finding files that they should have been the first files given. Right. Tape recordings of Carlos Marcello, the Godfather, talking about aspects of the assassination.
This was when the FBI was bugging his through Jack Van Lanningham.
Right, in the mid-'80s. Yeah. They sat on that until the very end. The CIA, all of their plans, the plans for a coup in Cuba and the AM World operation, even files naming Commander Juan Almeida, the head of the Cuban army, who was going to lead that coup for JFK. All these files, right at the end. So then there was another year after the review board ended. Everybody went home. The agencies had an extra year to, offer up whatever they felt like. Mm-hmm. And to this day, right this very minute, the National Archives will not say how many pages of JFK files or how many hundreds of hours of tapes of people like Carlos Marcello talking about the JFK assassination remain unreleased. They won't even give the figure. Now, those files were all supposed to have been released in the 90s. Anything withheld for national security is supposed to be released in 2017, but we don't know. Are we talking 1 million pages, which is what NBC said, millions of pages back in '98? And so it's just ridiculous.
Why are they stonewalling
this? Two big reasons. And we're going to talk about one today in respect of the Secret Service. They're hiding embarrassing information. Now, you may wonder, why does what someone did 50 years ago impact agencies today? Well, here's why. In those days, you and I have this gray hair because we remember when people would get a job and keep it for 30 years.
Right.
I mean, my father, I think he...
My dad too, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what they did. So
40 years.
Yeah, so people who were coming up, who were active in the 60s, I mean, they weren't retiring in many cases until till the late 80s, even the early 90s, and their proteges who came up under them, who owe them their loyalty, they're still in position.
You're talking about in institutions like the CIA, the NSA, the Secret Service.
Right, because presidents come and go. The directors of those agencies, they come and go, but it's your number 3, 4, 5, 6 guys in those organizations who are there for the career.
Right.
And plus, the other problem is once you start covering things up, how can you ever reveal it? Secret Service, for instance, in coordination with the CIA and the FBI and Naval Intelligence, withheld that attempt to kill JFK in Tampa, Florida, 4 days before Dallas.
Right. We dug that out.
We looked through thousands of pages of newspaper microfilm.
I remember it well.
And we found one little article that slipped out the day after JFK was killed, and then the very next day, nobody knew anything.
Right.
But luckily, when I called the Tampa chief of police in the mid-'90s, he's like, "Hey, I've been waiting on this call for 30 years. I thought the Warren Commission, but the Warren Commission, and we'll talk about them in a minute too, they couldn't ask the chief of police in Tampa about the Tampa attempt because the Secret Service didn't tell them there had been one 4 days before Dallas. Think how different everything would have been if the general public had known. Now, why was it kept secret at the time? The Kennedys wanted it kept secret, and they had been making plans, and this is in the book, and you and I have talked about this before, for 2 months before JFK's murder, the Bobby Kennedy had a secret subcommittee of the National Security Council, and there's actual documentation. You can see some of it in the book, and I'm going to try to post more online soon, making plans for what to do if an American official was assassinated.
Right. This was their Cuba contingency plan. This was the what if, we keep trying to kill Castro. What if he gets sufficiently PO'd that he takes out our ambassador to Guatemala or something?
And being a perfect example. And as a close aide to one of the Kennedys explained to me, who actually got to read all of the hundreds of pages of the Cuba contingency plans, I can tell you there were at least 5 agencies involved. They were supposed to make 10 copies of each draft. There were a dozen drafts. One agency released 2 drafts and 1 piece of paper. And all the other agencies just hid that this planning ever existed. But you're right.
And this was the plan, by the way, that was invoked when Kennedy was killed, where they nationalized his body, basically mutilated it, and lied to the Warren Commission.
Well, what you have to think of is, again, and a close Kennedy aide explained this to me. He said, how would it look? Okay, so we're getting ready to overthrow Fidel Castro. Not an assassination attempt the way they saw it. Not involving the mafia, as the Kennedys,
Right.
The Kennedys
this is the real deal, using the number 3 guy in Cuba,
right,
the head of the army.
The head of the Cuban army, the founder of the Cuban army,
right.
Much more powerful than Che
Guevara.
Right. And so, who, by the way, only died, I believe, in 2011, I think it was, or 2009. Very recently. So, again, we get to that, why so much secrecy for so long.
Right. Lamar, we're hitting a break here. We'll come back.
Sure.
Okay. Lamar Waldron is with us, his new book, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination. And it's great to have Lamar back in the studio. We'll be right back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
And the trade paperback for The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination. What, is it available online now? Should be soon. Yeah, there you go. So you were talking about how we were talking about the Cuba contingency plan.
Right. In other words,
this was in the context of the larger context of these agencies trying to cover up embarrassing
Right. In other words, so the 3 points to remember are: we were getting ready, the U.S. super top secret program to overthrow Fidel Castro using the number 3 man in Cuba to the head of the Cuban army, who would not claim credit. From later released CIA files, it does appear a patsy or a fall guy, which is what Harry Williams called the person, would take the blame, and CIA
or
files
the credit.
show the credit,
Right.
and would and he would probably, according to CIA files, be a Russian or Russian sympathizer.
Right.
So it would look like the Russians had
It would
killed.
look like Khrushchev had taken out
Right.
Castro.
The Russians were trying to just take over Cuba,
Right.
and had killed Fidel. Almeida could go on television and say, the dastardly Russians have killed our beloved Fidel. That would neutralize the more than 10,000 Russians still in Cuba. So that was going to happen December 1st. We have the documentation, 1963, 10 days after Dallas. In case Castro found out, tried to retaliate by assassinating a U.S. official, these Cuba contingency plans were made for what to do if it looked like the ambassador to Guatemala, to use your example, had been assassinated.
By Castro.
Well,
If it looked like it was by Castro.
Well, or what if he's even just shot and you don't know if it's by Castro? So the plan, as it was described to me, and I actually talked to someone who actually worked on the plan, as well as somebody who saw all the drafts, was you don't want to start World War III only to find out he had been shot by, his mistress's jealous lover. Right. Not that the ambassador to Guatemala in '63 had a mistress. I don't know. I'm just using it as a hypothetical. Or it could have been just a common street robbery.
Mm-hmm.
So the Cuba contingency planning that was done, and the plans weren't finished, but the planning was to buy time for the president to make a reasoned decision, which is why you had to have a military autopsy at a U.S. military base, because you wouldn't want some Guatemalan hospital trying to autopsy this ambassador with all the leaks.
Right.
We just saw with the new Iraqi prime minister what can happen when a foreign leader says the wrong thing. So that's why you have to get it to a U.S. military facility like Bethesda. Mm-hmm. By the way, the conference this week is in Bethesda.
Right.
So.
Interesting. Which is where Jack's body was taken.
Right. And you would have to have federal. Are you
going to do it in the autopsy room?
No. We're not actually on the base. We're in a hotel there. But again, that's why you would have. And as it turned out, it was Bobby Kennedy that was controlling the autopsy, not shadowy journals. Bobby Kennedy and Admiral Berkeley, JFK's personal physician, they were in charge. There's plenty of documentation of that. Bobby wound up with all the sensitive evidence that was never fully analyzed, like JFK's brain, that apparently was reburied with JFK when he was permanently interred, I think around 1967. Plus, that helped ensure that District Attorney Jim Garrison could not subpoena that kind of evidence. So all that was going on. So there was a lot of secrecy, and a lot of secrecy was designed to prevent World War III. That was the bottom line. Prevent World War III. This is a year after that tense nuclear standoff of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Unfortunately, tragically, JFK killed the mafia who had been barred from the coup plan, barred from reopening their casinos if the coup was successful, managed to infiltrate it and kill JFK instead. But these agencies had used all that secrecy for 50 years to hide their own mistakes back in 1963
Amazing.
That have continued to this day.
20 minutes past the hour. Yeah. 20 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Lamar Waldron in the studio with me, the author of The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination. Shortly be available in paperback, in trade paperback, and the in town for a conference of JFK assassination researchers. And
we should add journalists and historians. People don't realize how many tenured historians are fully behind a conspiracy. I mean, there's Dr. David Kaiser.
Well, Congress was fully behind a conspiracy.
People forget that. I mean, there was a big editorial, I believe, in the New York Times recently, and I need to go back and read it in depth. But when I skimmed it, it was making it sound like it's kind of new to believe in a conspiracy. But there were at least 5 investigations into the assassination that followed the Warren Commission, and the most recent congressional investigation did conclude in 1979 that JFK was definitely, they used the term because they're Congress, likely killed by a conspiracy, and that Carlos Marcello, godfather of Louisiana and Texas, and Santo Trafficante, the godfather of Tampa and the father of the French Connection heroin network, had the, quote, motive, means, and opportunity to have killed JFK. They couldn't, and they did refer it for prosecution to the Justice Department and the FBI, but they couldn't be more definitive, and they didn't know about the role of Johnny Roselli, the associate of Marcello and Trafficante, because Trafficante had had him killed shortly before the House Select Committee was formed.
And dismembered and stuffed into a 56-gallon
So much was
barrel.
withheld from them by, like the Tampa attempt, like these Cuba contingency plans, an attempt to kill JFK in Chicago 3 weeks before Dallas, the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was under tight surveillance by naval intelligence the entire time he was back in the United States after his so-called defection to the Soviet Union. So much was withheld. And the Secret Service, because they've been in the news recently, they're just the worst example. There were other things that the Warren Commission never fully found out about. People have heard so we recently had the intruder who got in.
Right, and you've got right-wingers all over America because the president is a Democrat saying, "Oh my God, the Secret Service has fallen apart. It must be because of the president."
Right. But these things have been going on for ages. You may remember there have been 3 horrible drinking incidents. One in the Netherlands, and this is JFK's. President Obama. Easy to get him confused. Security detail.
Right.
Drinking incidents in the Netherlands, the drinking and the prostitution thing in Colombia, and then down in Miami. And then there's been this huge ongoing lawsuit with racism and a noose and just horrible problems. Well, go back to 1963. They had horrible problems with racism. Back then, there were
Abraham Bolton on this program, a former Secret Service agent, first black Secret Service agent to serve in the presidential detail.
Exactly right.
Laid all his stuff out.
Right. He had to leave the presidential detail because his superiors wouldn't act on the racism. Yeah. And then he also noticed incredibly heavy drinking, within hours of needing to protect the president. What was originally hidden from the Warren Commission, and then they found out a little, was that 10 Secret Service agents were out drinking until between 3 and 5 a.m. the morning, like literally, hours, 7 hours before the bullets flew, in a sleazy club in Fort Worth owned by a buddy of Jack Ruby's. And reportedly, some of the agents were drinking, pure Everclear alcohol. That's what the bar owner said. It's actually a coffee shop, so they had to secretly serve the liquor. And that was originally hidden from the Warren Commission. They eventually found out a little about it. So we simply see these problems today, even the presidential protection problems. The thing with the recent thing is nothing compared to what happened in Chicago, where they were shadowing 4 men, the Secret Service was. Well, they'd heard 4 men were going to try to kill JFK. They were shadowing 2 of them. One of the agents blew the surveillance. They got away. The only person who wound up getting arrested in Chicago was an ex-military guy who apparently was the fall guy who worked in a warehouse overlooking the motorcade route, had arms and ammo and stuff in his car, but they didn't even charge him with that because they were supposed to keep this attempt secret. So they charged him with having, I think it was some sort of a bladed weapon in his front seat, which does, again, ring bells with that recent attempt at the White House, because that guy had a knife, and then when they searched his car, he had, I believe, 800 rounds of ammunition. Right. So those
the knife was apparently a pocket knife.
Right. It was, I think,
that he always carried with him.
Yeah. The ammo is a little more troubling. Yeah. But again, he was a troubled ex-serviceman, and I'm sure he had PTSD. So I'm not putting anything on him at all. But again, if we go back to Chicago, the real assassins got away because the Secret Service blew the surveillance, and only the guy who was apparently intended to be the Chicago patsy,
the Chicago Oswald.
Right, the Chicago Oswald. And by the way, there was a Tampa Oswald, right. A guy, a Cuban exile. And the guy in Chicago had a dozen parallels to Oswald. The guy in Tampa had 24 parallels to Oswald.
For example, parallels.
Well, the one in Tampa, for instance, he hung out with the Fair Play for Cuba committee. Some of his friends thought he was pro-Castro. Others thought he was anti-Castro. He actually got into what some people think was a staged fist fight. He moved away from his wife at the same time Oswald moved away from his wife. he went to the Tampa Oswald, Gilberto Policarpo Lopez, actually then went to Dallas after Trafficante called off the Tampa attempt because authorities had found out about it. So, and they're about the same age. They're even about the same physical description. In fact, the description for the assailant that was being sought in Tampa while JFK was going ahead with his motorcade, because he had to, because he was going to give a speech that night in Miami with a few lines written specifically to reassure Commander Almeida that, yes, in 2 weeks, you should go ahead with that coup. So JFK couldn't, even though this was the second threat, in 2.5 weeks, he couldn't call it off. He had to go through with it. The description issued in Tampa for the unknown assailant who was going to shoot JFK from a tall building matches Oswald. It matches Gilberto Lopez very well, but it matches Oswald better than the first description put out in Dallas. So again, there weren't three different plans. There was one plan
to kill kill President Kennedy
in three
different cities over a 2 or 3 week period.
Right, and three different patsies who have remarkable similarities between them. So if Oswald had been hit by a truck the day before,
then they would have slid Lopez in.
He was already in.
So the plan was triply redundant and then doubly redundant within the triple redundancy.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 866-987-THOM.
Lamar Waldron's new book, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, soon out in trade paperback. You can check it out at your favorite source. We'll be back with Lamar and your calls for Lamar. Occupying the media 3 hours a day, 5 days a week. Thom Hartmann here with you. And here in the studio with me today, Lamar Waldron, author of The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, and his new book on the Oswald, on the Oswald assassination, on the Kennedy assassination. Well, on the Oswald assassination,
right?
Too.
Yeah, I mean, see, and again, that's actually great wording to use because Lee Harvey Oswald was assassinated by somebody working for Carlos Marcello and Santo Trafficante, an actual personal associate of them, just as JFK was.
And arguably, Jack Ruby was assassinated, too, by Texas refusing to let him out of the Texas jails. He was begging. He was to J. Edgar Hoover. He was saying, I'll tell you stuff if you get me out of this state.
Right, and then he has a physical, and he's clear to go. His conviction, he's granted a new trial because, it was pretty biased to try him in Dallas, where he fronted a sleazy strip club for Marcello's organization. Right. And then within a week or so of that court decision saying, you got to move him from his cell reportedly overlooking Dealey Plaza. I haven't confirmed that, but it's been reported his cell overlooked Dealey Plaza. What a reminder to keep your mouth shut. And within a week of that, having a perfect physical, he comes down with cancer and dies. Before he can be moved to, I think it was Wichita Falls for his new trial.
Amazing. We've got a bunch of questions from people here. One point. I just went over and I was the second signature in the petition. Lamar's was the first. If you go to The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination.com, yes, it has the thes and the ofs and the whole. The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, and there's 4 S's in assassination. ASS. You're
a better speller.
INATION. Oh, I'm looking at the back of the book. If you go to that website, you can sign this petition to release these files and also to pardon Abraham Bolden, who has been on this program and you and I have both written about.
Right, who was framed by the mafia when he came to Washington to tell the Warren Commission staff about the Chicago attempt, about the Tampa attempt,
and then he ended
about
up
the
in jail.
excessive drinking. And these mob operatives framed him, and his main accuser later admitted under oath, he committed perjury. Yeah. And Bolden's judge told the jury Bolden was guilty.
Amazing stuff.
And so so if you want to get all the files released while you're still alive, because CIA says they might not release them in 2017, and pardon Bolden, go to the Hidden History of the JFK Assassination.com. That'll have a link to this White House petition. Right now we have 2 signatures, mine and Tom's. We need to get a total of 100,000.
Right, to get the White House to respond.
Official White House response. And then 2 more things too, Tom. I'm going to be working with your people about getting a tweet out about that.
Yeah, we'll tweet it out as soon as we get off the air.
And if people, because we're just who we are. Okay, we don't have the big publicity machines that the right wing has. But if people will retweet your tweet and ask their friends to do it, ask their friends to sign that petition, maybe we can get this going. There's also on the hidden history of the JFK assassination.com, I just kind of restarted my Facebook page. So the same thing there, go there, share that. It's got information about Bolden, about the files. And, social media is probably the only way we're going to have any chance to really get the White House's attention. And so, because the White House should just order, these agencies to comply with that 1992 law.
All it would take is an executive order. Channing in Indianapolis, Indiana, you have a question for Lamar. Channing?
Yeah.
Hey,
Hello?
You're on the air.
Hi, good afternoon. I want to believe in in the conspiracy theory. I do. I've read, watched Oliver Stone stuff and seen my PBS Frontline about it. The thing that I can't understand, though, is if there's a conspiracy, they would have had to have arranged Oswald's employment at the school book depository. And I don't see how that could have been done, given the facts. Could you maybe go into that a little bit?
Well, sure, because if you look at the facts real closely, not it's just Oswald in isolation, but Oswald in terms of these other two patsies in Chicago and Tampa. At the same time, Oswald, he made that very mysterious to many people trip to Mexico City, which I fully explain in the book. Then he comes back to Dallas. He does not move in with his wife and his child. He goes to a rooming house. Well, first he stays at a YMCA. He starts looking for these jobs. Well, at the very minute he's checking into a YMCA in Dallas, in Chicago, that the ex-Marine in Chicago, Valley, is also checking into a YMCA, also looking for jobs. And guess what? Both Oswald and Valley both wind up with jobs at warehouses overlooking, really, really well overlooking JFK's motorcade route in places where the motorcade would have to slow down a great deal. In other words, the motorcade, both in Valley's case and in Oswald's case, it's not like they're going 40 miles an hour. They're having to almost come to a complete stop. So when you look at it in that context, and I do have a lot of other information in the book that explains Oswald, the job and his activity.
So who helped Oswald get this job in this place where he could be accused of assassinating the president?
Basically, there's six different witnesses that saw Oswald with, and most of them say he was working for a guy in New Orleans by the name of Guy Bannister, the ex-FBI chief of Chicago, who was a heavy drinker, white supremacist, ultra anti-communist kind of guy. He also and Oswald was working for Bannister in the summer of '63. Bannister also did a lot of work for naval intelligence and some for the CIA as well. So Oswald was never, I hate to say it, a genuine member of the far left. Ask yourself this: how many teenage communists, and that's what the Warren Commission said Oswald was, a teenage communist from the time he was a teenager, how many teenage communists not only joined the Civil Air Patrol, not only joined the United States Marines in the McCarthy 50s, but try to join the United States Marines a year before they're old enough. And then when he's in the Marines, he goes around spouting a love. And this is in the McCarthy 50s, when people are getting blacklisted, committing suicide, being sent to prison, being kept political prisoners. Oswald's going around the Marine base, not a bunch of softies there, especially these Marine drill sergeants, spouting a love of Russia and Russian so much, supposedly teaching himself to speak Russian, a very difficult language, so much that his fellow Marine buddies call him Oswaldskovich. Guess how many times Oswald was ever attacked by his fellow Marines for that, was written up, was disciplined? Zero. So in other words, Oswald...
and he ended up in Japan at Natsuki Air Force Base.
The secret U-2 base in Japan.
Where he was learning Russian, and from there he defects to the Soviet Union.
Well, he actually learned Russian, I think it was... Monterey Language Institute in California. But yeah, he was actually doing intelligence work in Tokyo. Oswald didn't, finish high school, 120 IQ, but learning disabilities. He's going to this bar, and we all kind of generally know what Japanese bars are like, and you have these hostesses. It costs a lot of money. The queen bee, the top, most beautiful, most expensive hostess at this one bar, does she hang out with the officers there? The enlisted men who have money? No, she hangs out with Oswald. Again, we know from his fellow Marines, he was already working for naval intelligence at that time.
And everybody knew it. And they realized that his I Love Russia was a front.
Right. It was a front. That's why his fellow Marines didn't beat him up. one of his own fellow Marines, you and I tried to track down this guy, thought Oswald was so strange that before the assassination, this guy, Kerry Thornley, wrote a book about Oswald because this guy was so bizarre.
Yeah.
So basically, Oswald
Guy
was
Bannister helps Oswald get the
Guy Bannister's working
job.
for U.S. intelligence, naval intelligence, CIA, and
no, they don't want Oswald on the assassination route. It's the mafia who wants him on the assassination route.
Oswald thinks he's going to get another assignment. You know, he was one of 6 young men around the same age that went to Russia around the same time on these funny defections. 5 came back around the same time with Russian wives. We wanted to see, United States government, how the KGB would then try to keep contact with Oswald or his wife.
Right.
So he was under tight naval surveillance. Handling that tight surveillance was, in New Orleans, was Guy Bannister and Guy Bannister's associate, the former Eastern Airlines pilot by the name of David Ferry, also rabid anti-communist, also a former CIA asset
and
as
David
well.
Ferry was the pilot for Carlos Marcello.
And Guy Bannister was the private detective for Carlos Marcello. So U.S. intelligence in Washington, they're looking at this distinguished guy, Guy Bannister, former FBI chief of Chicago, does good work for the CIA and FBI, as
put him in charge of handling Oswald. And he's actually working for Marcello, who is trying to position Oswald to take the fall for a hit that Marcello is
right. I'm totally certain Oswald was told to get a job in Dallas in some sort of a warehouse, and he was told the general area to do this in. But again, it's he's one of several people doing these same things at the same time.
Yeah, that's amazing. It's amazing. We have less than a minute before we're going to hit a break, because we've got a bunch of calls, a bunch of questions. One of these is a question about the role of Robert Kennedy going after the mob.
Oh, very important. Basically, John and Robert Kennedy led the biggest war against organized crime America had ever seen to that point, and really has ever seen. I mean, it was enormous because the mob had the run of not just the United States, but also Cuba in the 50s under Vice President Nixon, who was in bed with the mafia from his very first race for Congress when Mickey Cohen, the Los Angeles mobster, gave him money. I mean, so Nixon was in the mafia's pocket.
He was the vice president, and J. Edgar Hoover was being blackmailed by the mafia, as Tony Summers so brilliantly laid out.
It was literally up to Senator John F. Kennedy to use these labor hearings to go after Jimmy Hoffa and his mafia allies because the government really wasn't doing it.
Is that the Kefauver hearing?
No, that was earlier. This was the McClellan. But it was JFK and Bobby's show all the way.
Amazing. Lamar Waldron with us, his new book, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination. The website, www.thehiddenhistoryofthejfkassassination.com. Check it out. Sign the petition.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video
archives. And the book, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, soon out, like a matter of weeks here, in trade paperback. You can pre-order it or order it at your favorite outlet. And welcome back. James in Spokane, Washington, watching Free Speech TV on the Dish Network. You have a question for Lamar?
Excuse me. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Hi.
Yeah, I wanted to ask if you think there's any relevancy to inadvertently or advertently George Hickey, the Secret Service agent, in the followed vehicle might have let loose a round from his AR-15 rifle and hit Kennedy in the head.
Glad you asked that question. There are 2 theories out there. One was that theory, that George Hickey, his gun went off. And that has been looked into so much. There is absolutely zero credibility to it. There were plenty of witnesses there. There was a lot of film going on. And like I say, it just didn't happen. And when the book was originally published.
Which book?
There was actually a book that the Secret Service agent accidentally shot JFK.
Right.
I believe there was some sort of a carefully worded apology from the publisher. But then people die and theories get refloated. You and I actually heard the theory way back that the Secret Service driver turned around and shot JFK.
Right.
And sure enough,
I remember a guy really aggressively trying to convince me of this.
Right, Bill Cooper. Yeah. And so sure enough, the power of suggestion, when he would show a really bad copy of the Zapruder film, and you're told that, you're kind of looking and you can't really tell. Luckily, the Zapruder film, which, by the way, guys, is authentic. I mean, that's been looked into very, very, very closely. Because I think it shows a conspiracy, so they wouldn't have faked it. But no, I mean, the Secret Service driver does not do it. We should add for the Secret Service driver, he was not one of the people out drinking until 3 to 5 a.m.
That particular guy.
And he slowed down because, as one of the guys in the follow-up car told you, one of JFK's closest aides, they thought they were riding into an ambush because the first shot came from the front, came from the grassy knoll. So anybody, especially a trained Secret Service driver, is going to hit the brakes when they hear a shot from the front.
Right, yeah. And that was Dave Powers who told me that. Al in Des Moines, Iowa. Hey, Al, you're on, thanks for watching Free Speech TV. You have a question for Lamar?
Mostly comments. As I recall, originally in the 50s, the CIA started the Manchurian Candidate Program, and they tested thousands of Marines from Korea and Japan. And those 5 or 6 Marines that went into Russia was the original graduates from the program. That's why the naval intelligence watched them so closely.
Anything to this, Lamar?
Unfortunately not. Manchurian Candidate was a good movie. The CIA did a lot of experiments. Don't get me wrong, a lot of experiments with mind control.
Right.
But did Oswald ever take LSD? He went into, I believe it was in New York, the New Orleans District Attorney's office, and I believe asked if LSD was legal or illegal, because in '63 it was still legal. Mm-hmm. So I don't rule out that he in a very low level way, like some other Marines might have,
gotten high.
Yeah, gotten high, been dosed at some time or whatever. But that really tight mind control where people are doing things they don't want to do. The CIA success rate there is extremely, extremely low. And Oswald has rational, well-documented reasons for every single thing he did.
Yeah, I have a friend who, thank you, Al, for the call. A friend who went to MIT back in the 60s and was given acid by the government and, without being told, ended up being compensated for it. I mean, this stuff is out.
There was a whole village in France where I believe they dosed the village.
Wow.
And that was covered up for years. So the CIA does try that, but that doesn't...
But not successfully. We'll be back. Hey, thanks so much to our show director, Louise Hartman, to our executive producer, Sean Taylor, our associate producers, Shane Farnan and Danielle Gilday, to our video director, Jim Javinsky, our board op, Troy Miller, the writer-researchers, Andrew Campbell and Nate Sweet, to Alva Goldbook for video production, to our webmasters, Nigel Peacock and Jamie Holly, our business manager, Ron Hartenbaum, all the folks at all the various companies that carry this program to you, Westwood One, Pacifica Radio, Sirius XM Satellite Radio, Cable Radio Network, Free Speech TV on Dish Network and Direct TV, all the cable providers who carry our show, Comcast, Manhattan Neighborhood Network, others around the country, the great folks at Free Speech TV and RTTV who work on the big picture, to the Progressive Voices channel on TuneIn, to Netroots Radio at netrootsradio.com, to our newsletter editor, Sue Nethercutt, and all the folks in our chat room, to Ellen Ratner, Victoria Jones, Bob Ney, and everyone at the Talk Radio News Service, to Jay Goodman-Tamboli for tech support, to our affiliates, our sponsors and underwriters, and to you for supporting our program. Thank you. In the studio with us is Lamar Waldron, his new book, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination, shortly out in trade paperback. Any day now, any week now, you can pre-order it from pretty much wherever you get your books from.
And I should say this, the hardback has been discounted on Amazon, but of course you also want to patronize your local bookstores. This is one of the few books where the only book, where I did not extensively revise from the hardback to the trade paperback. So in our previous books, Ultimate Sacrifice, Legacy of Secrecy, you always want to get those trade paperbacks because there was just huge stuff. I mean, 100 pages or more, just totally
that were
redone.
not in the original hardcovers.
Right. Even the Watergate book, Hidden History of Watergate, there were 5 critical new pages at the start. This book, the hardback, the trade paperback, whatever you can get the best deal on.
Go for it.
Go for it.
There you go. And the website is thehiddenhistoryofthejfkassassination.com, where you can sign the petition to pardon Abraham Bolden and release these documents. Sheila in Tempe, Arizona. You're on the air with Lamar Waldron.
Hello. Thank you very much for taking my call. But I have to tell you that I am a firm believer of Lee Harvey Oswald having acted alone. I have since the day of the assassination. I was 20 when it happened, and also Clint Hill feels that way. I attended a book signing just a few months ago. He was, as everybody knows, the Secret Service agent for Jackie Kennedy. At that time, I've also read Vincent Bugliosi's book, which I'm sure you have also, and disagree with. It just seems to me there are so many. This is the last comment. There are conspiracies all over the place. I don't doubt there could have been a conspiracy in Chicago and all this. Any president is going to get it. I'm sure Obama has. There's probably dozens of potential conspiracies right now to assassinate him. But anyway, I would just like your comment about what I had to say. And again, thank you for taking my call.
Sure. Thank you.
Well, I'd like to address that if you could, Tom.
Go for it.
Sure. Well, I haven't read Clint Hill's book because the Secret Service agent books are notoriously, light on substantial stuff.
Right, and they're biopic.
Right, and I don't believe he recounts, going to the Cellar Door Club in Fort Worth with 10 of his agents. Now, he had drinks there. What this club did, because it didn't have a liquor license, you could buy, say, orange Kool-Aid flavored with rum flavoring.
Mm.
Because the Dallas cops originally, somebody would get like orange juice with vodka. Well, the Dallas cops originally would go in and stick their fingers in. If they taste the vodka, they'd arrest, the owner.
Mm.
Well, what he started doing, he would have vodka flavoring. So the Dallas cops, even if they stuck your finger in the drink. So, so I'm willing to grant that Clint Hill, who did act as he should have that day, he was just probably drinking flavored Kool-Aid. But he was there, and he did drink something there. Well, let's say it was flavored Kool-Aid, but some of those agents, were probably drinking more than that. But again, I do want to stress, the Secret Service had nothing to do with killing JFK.
Right.
Jack Ruby did apparently send over some strippers, but the fact that the Secret Service agents were out drinking and partying with these scantily clad waitresses, they were taken there by Bob Schieffer, the CBS News anchor who worked for a Dallas media outlet. Then, they wore only underwear or bikinis. The reason they were out partying that late was because there was no threat as there had been in Chicago and Tampa.
Right.
So
in Chicago and Tampa, the Secret Service knew that there was an active threat against the president to assassinate him. They thought by the time they got to Dallas, it was over. It was over, and now we can have a party.
Now
bring on the strippers.
Now we can relax. And again, for your listener, I would just, if she can answer those questions, she can find another teenage communist teenager in the 50s, McCarthy 50s, who joined the United States Marines and who spouted that love of Russia and all things Russian so much and never got disciplined for it. Somebody besides Oswald.
Well, also, at the time of the shooting, Oswald was not on the 6th floor of the school book depository. I mean, isn't that fairly well established?
Well, again, I have to say this. The mafia doesn't leave anything to chance. They laid out a pretty good, they framed him very well. But there are many problems. You and I have been in a couple of documentaries on Discovery Channel that NBC News produced. One of those guys were like, well, we're going to show Oswald taking the rifle in the book depository that morning wrapped his curtain rods.
Right.
I'm like, no, can't do that. The one guy that saw Oswald enter that building that morning said there was nothing in his hands.
Right.
So, in other words, he did take a package with him to work. Also, the guy who gave him a lift, who's going to be at the conference, said Oswald held the package cupped under his armpit and cupped in his hand in a way that a dismantled Mannlicher Carcano cannot be held that way. It's too long. So whatever Oswald took, it may not have been the curtain rods that was his cover story, but it wasn't a Mannlicher Carcano, and nobody saw him take anything into that book depository. And so there are dozens of those things. There's plenty of evidence Oswald was down, I believe it was the second floor.
Yeah, it was the second floor where the lunch counter was. Or
right. And there was a Coke machine there. In fact, the first cop to run in there ran
into Oswald.
Right, saw him
on the second floor.
The Coke machine. So, and then they said, well, he came down the stairs really quick. No, there were people who were on those stairs who did not see Oswald. So, again, I grant there's a good circumstantial case against Oswald, but it all falls apart.
And if you have any doubts, pick up The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination by Lamar Waldron. And it's all there. There's also a fair amount at the website, The Hidden History of the JFK Assassination.com, and you can sign the petition. Lamar, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks so much for having me.